Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Seraphine podcast. Today, we've got Mallory Janson and Aja James. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Really good. I'm so glad we're doing this a second time around.
Take two.
Take two. First time, we were all like, I've got my dogs, and they were downstairs, and one was like, oh, and then we were like, oh, wouldn't it be so cute to have your little guy, Jaden? And Jaden was not having it. P.S. I have one of his toys still.
Oh, fun.
With a little wind-up arm.
He will love it.
Yeah. So anyway, welcome. I'm so glad you guys are here. And we are loud and proud in our Dylan Lex jewelry today.
Love it.
I love being adorned in this. But anyway, it feels pretty good to be sitting with you guys. My first podcast was with Dr. Auburn Ellis, and it was heavy stuff. Plus, Auburn is off the charts, really smart. Now, you guys know Auburn because she works with you at Flexy, right?
Yes.
So I'll let them kind of have a little throw it over to you guys to talk about Flexy a little bit, and then also just to talk about how you choose kind of people to join your team.
Yeah, totally. So Flexy is our business. It's a fitness company. Basically, we travel to different locations, whether it be like the office that you work at or apartment complexes, and we essentially staff the trainers and yoga instructors there. So any fitness needs that they have, we provide that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Long story short.
And and it was pretty cool because when I first met them, I again was through with Shop YPG, and we have this group of heroes, and heroes are basically females in the fitness community that are doing kind of really cool things, and then being small business owners, and then creating now a team, which is pretty cool. So talk to me about your team, some of the women on the team, how you go about like inviting people to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It kind of just depends. I don't think we've like nailed down how we find people, but I feel like the right people find us. We have a great team of 10 of us total.
Yep.
In Springfield, Missouri, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and obviously Kansas City is the bulk of our team. And they're great. We just look for people that want to inspire others. They're not necessarily your, they're definitely like great fitness trainers. I don't want to say they're not hardcore because they're hard. The trainers and the classes are hard, but they're not like the type that are going to be screaming at you if you can't do it. It's
way more empowering, like motivating. You leave and you're like, I feel like a better person now.
Yes.
Like it's not just about, the sweat and all of that stuff. It's more about like, how do you just empower yourself, period, and find that energy within yourself,
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like the days of like screaming at you are kind of over.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I just feel like coming out of COVID and then obviously the social climate we're in, it's a little bit more, not that we need to be completely like with gloved hands with each other, but I do believe that health and wellness and fitness now needs to be more considered of who our audience is and who we are actually. To me, I went through a huge moment with yoga where I'm like, oh no, like I have to rework how I frame this up because I feel like yoga has been really whitewashed and whitewashed in the sense of just what we have in our actual classrooms, what we bring to the table, and how it becomes taking away from the roots of where it began.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys have found any shifts and changes within your own training just based on obviously COVID and then the social climate with all the protests. Have you made any kind of conscious changes in interacting with the people that you train?
Yeah.
And then as a company, have you changed any kind of philosophy about where you're going to go with maybe hiring practices or I don't know, just again, I know it sounds weird to be like philosophically, emotionally, but when you're talking about spending an hour of a day with someone, you really got to think about, all right, what's my message as a company?
Right.
Totally. I definitely think that we are, and not to say we weren't saying, how are you before, but now it's like, how are you? Like, let's sit and talk about that for a second before it's just like, okay, your warm-up starts right now. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like walk in the door and let's get started. It's like walk in the door and let's figure out where we're even starting in general. Like, how are you today? And then we're going to base the workout off of that. Actually, I had a client come in the other day. I say come in, it was an outdoor workout. But she was coming up the steps and she was just like defeated. I could just see it in her. And instead of even doing the workout, we just went on like a 4-mile walk. Like, it didn't, you know what I mean? It was just like, let's just tell me about your day, because I can see that you don't want to just run up the stairs 40 times. So just tell me how your day was. But we were obviously still moving. And it's not like I charged her for the session or anything like that. But I think it's more about really checking in with people and going from there, instead of just being like, this is my business and we're going to figure it out and you're going to pay X amount of dollars at the end of this hour, you know. Yeah. Way more about the person. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we were already based around that. So it's not a massive transition, but it's just like allowing it to be the focus without stressing over it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you felt any major changes within yourself in terms of going in with clients, or just how you want to show up?
Yeah.
Now?
I think that for me, with everything going on and how heavy it is, it weighs on me, but my clients want to talk about it, and I ask them how they are, like always, but they've been asking me, like, how are you really doing? How are you feeling? Like, you know, they just want to be there too. So I think making that connection with our clients is what makes it different, because they do care. If I'm like, guys, I'm just defeated today, I can't do it. I'm like Mallory's client walking into my session, like, I can't do this today. They care. So I think just listening to my feelings and making sure that I'm aware of how I'm feeling, so I know how I'm also coming across to my clients, because I don't want to come and seem like I'm down and defeated and depressed. I want to be happy for them, but they want to talk about it too. So we talk for however long. I just gauge how long they want to talk. Sometimes we're like, all right, well, 20 minutes of our session has gone by. We've talked about everything in the world right now, so let's get started. And then we do a more intense, shorter workout or something, but we just gauge it based off of that. And I think that it's interesting because majority of my clients are, I guess they're white. Yeah. And then I've got one that is biracial, like I am. Mm-hmm. And we talk about, you know, how it was growing up as a biracial kid and how it is as an adult now, and like just stuff like that. So it's something that we haven't really talked about before until now, but I've been training her for 2 years. So it's opened up more conversation, and I feel like we're still getting to know each other a little bit deeper.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you brought that up, because I do believe that, you know, when I first talked to you guys about being on this podcast, you know, I had mentioned, so just so our listeners and viewers have a kind of a background. So Aja is the daughter of our it's mayor, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm always like mayor, governor, because you're in the hot spot. But it was the joke, like a little bit of a joke and banter between us. I was like, well, I really want to go a little deeper on this podcast, and just talk about our lives, and having a father who was the face of Kansas City, who's an African-American male. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, well, she's going to have a stance. Like, she's going to talk politics. And she was really honest. She was like, you know, I don't really get into it. And I'm going to have you sit with this real quickly, because I'm going to go to Mallory and have you kind of sit, because I'm going to ask you some heavy questions. Okay. And I don't want you to feel like right out the door you're going to be like, okay, I don't know how to answer this. But I guess I want to ask you, Aja, what's kind of transitioned for you? I feel like since we had that conversation, it was maybe 3 weeks ago, I see more of a presence of you on social media, you're being vulnerable. You're putting out there like some things that are like, you know, like I'm figuring this out. So I want you to ponder on that. And I'm going to ask you to ponder on this while she thinks of her answer. So Mallory has got an amazing son, Jaden. He's the cutest boy you will ever see. And maybe on the outtakes, you'll get to see him crawling all over the place and being like, Mom, what are you doing? Yeah. But I want to talk to you about having a child, having a biracial child, and what started I know that you are aware that you have a biracial child,
right.
but like this time was like, it's like rattling our cages.
Oh, yeah.
To be like, you got to do more than just be like, you know, I honor his heritage. Like now it's like you have to, we're all called upon now to have an opinion, especially if we want things to change. So as you ponder that, I'm going to you. So what changed and how do you feel now? Like when you think about going forward, like what's changed in you?
So I think as far as like speaking out on social media and being vulnerable and all of that, it was kind of when everything started. It was when I realized and when I really thought about it that I'm like, this is not political. And I don't know anything about politics. I know very little about politics, I should say. I don't enjoy speaking politics. I don't like the conflict when you have, and I get very set in my feelings too. So I know how that can go. So I was like, I don't really like talking about stuff like that. But then when this all happened, you realize it's not a political issue. It's a human rights issue. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I felt like I needed to speak about because I have my own experiences. And on top of that, we all have different audiences. So I think that if I were silent on my page, it might make people think that I'm not invested in it, that I don't really see a problem with it, even if I'm doing things behind the scenes. So I personally just felt that it was very important for me to put it out there, regardless of however many people see it or don't see it, just put out there how I'm feeling. And I just feel like even if one or two people that thinks opposite of me sees that, they might be like, oh, but I like her. So maybe I need to rethink my stance on everything. It's different when you have a personal connection with somebody. So I also, to be blunt, I don't want a bunch of people following me or around me that feel that Black lives don't matter. So if you don't agree on that, you can kind of remove yourself.
It's kind of a great feeling when you just don't care. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the one thing that happened for me, and I don't know if it happened for you, but I lost some people and then I gained some people.
Oh, yeah.
And it felt really good to be like, all right, I am glad because now, and some of these people were in my life a long time. And I'm like, all right, if this is where the line is drawn, then I guess the line is drawn. So how about for you? Because what I loved, so what I saw was your social media came up and Mallory did this beautiful thing where she was breaking down some terminology, some ways to think about things that, again, when we're navigating these it's uncharted territory, basically. I mean, this is like water out in the Bermuda Triangle, right? Especially for those of us who, I've always considered myself to be pretty open-minded. Before I would be like, the colorblind thing, I don't see color. And then, I revisited a book last year because I was thinking about adopting. And I was looking at a boy that looks exactly like Jaden, because unfortunately it is young African-American males here in Kansas City that are the children that are being adopted. And they're actually of the ages of like 8 to teens that need to be adopted.
Yeah.
So cute, adorable babies. That's wonderful to have a young child in your life. But if you're bringing in a child 8 or 9 years old who's already been with a family,
right? I
knew I had to do the work. So I started to read Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad, and I've never been more uncomfortable in my fucking life. And I reread it again over this time period. And I did. A knee-jerk completely began to think about you. And it's so weird because it was before I even talked to you about the podcast. So I guess what I would want to know is what came up for you? I mean, like emotions, and then I just saw you put yourself out there, and I was like, hell yes, go for it.
Yeah.
Where did you get it from? Courage.
Right. Well, thank you. Like that actually really means a lot to me because I hope I never want Jaden to ever question where I stand. And I've always definitively stood exactly where I'm presenting now. You know what I mean? Like, if the conversation was ever to arise, I'm like, oh no, I'm very opinionated on this matter, but we can have a conversation about it. But obviously, you know, Black Lives Matter, period. Yeah. So that's just where I stand. But then obviously, again, just like with social media, like the whole world is erupting right now. Truly it is, because we're all like, this is enough, and it needs to definitively be said that it's enough, and there's no backtracking now. Like, we're not reverting back to what we were. So how do we move forward? And just in knowing that it takes white people to do that. I mean, Black people can't do it alone, because if they could, it would have already been done. You know what I mean? It literally would have already been done. I just got the chills, actually. But 13% of the population, how do you do that by yourself? You cannot. And then with Jaden, again, I never want him to question, like, well, Mom, you haven't really said anything. So, like, how do you feel about that? You know, and I don't want him to go out into the world without us ever having had a conversation about any of it. Like, I always want him to know, like, come to me with your feelings. And I even told Aja, like, when Jaden was, like, I don't know, 3 weeks old or something, I was like, obviously I'm white and Jaden's biracial, and I cannot relate to that because I'm just not. I'm not a boy. I'm not biracial. Those are two things I cannot relate to. Obviously, she's not a boy. But I was like, if he ever has feelings towards something, like, can you just take him on a walk or something? Because then, you know, you guys can at least talk about it, and he knows you have real world experiences. But he's never going to question whether or not I'm behind him or whether or not he can get on my shoulders at a rally. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I will always be there definitively for you no matter what. So I think just knowing that he needs to know where I stand, it was just like, okay, I'm going to be as loud as possible then, you know? And if he needs to know that, then obviously all my friends and my family do too, you know? But yeah, it's just kind of being loud now.
Yeah. Yeah. And having an opinion.
Yeah.
And I think for me, one thing that has changed, I've always been somebody who's, you know, I've been what I call like a baseline politically aware person. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, I want to know what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
And I do want to know if I'm voting for someone in office, like, what did they do anything during the protests? What have they changed their platform? Because at this point in time, I'm frustrated as fuck about what's going on. I mean, not we all. A lot of us are frustrated with our president. But then if you look at a state and local level, I didn't even realize that our police aren't controlled by the mayor or the governor. It's at a state level. And that was like, the only way I found that out was literally going to the protests and handing out some T-shirts and asking people to share their stories with me. And I'm like, God, how did I not know that at age 43? I was so embarrassed. So, you know, you get put in boxes too, because I don't know about the two of you, but I put you in a box because of your dad. And I was like, oh yeah, she's got to have some hardcore stance. And then, you know, you make assumptions about people, just like when you assume, like, you being a mother, a single mom right now. And then people go, oh, where's the dad? You know, then you have these moments where, like, you don't want to play into stereotype. You want to also defy it. And even if they got it right,
right,
you want to be able to ground yourself and be solid in terms of, all right, if you've got me in that box, then fine. I'm gonna be in the box, but I'm gonna do it right. You know, because not all boxes are bad, right? So I guess where I'm gonna ask you guys is, as you've gone through this life, because you guys are you guys both in your late 20s, right?
I just turned 30.
You just turned 30, yay! You're getting close to my age, and you're
28.
28. So what's changed in terms of, like, what do you feel like when people what they saw of you maybe 5 years ago to 10 years ago, the stereotype of who you were and who you are, and how a lot of people get it wrong. So I'll go with you first.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Branson.
Right? So white, like for me, I think immediately white.
Yeah.
I think like lake, and then I think like
a little country.
And you do, sometimes you're like, are they educated? Like, like you start to think of these, your brain goes there.
Stereotypes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're real, and they come from, somewhat of a bit of a knowledge of the area, right? It's just what people know about it, and then you just exaggerate the assumption, right? Totally. That's kind of what everything is. But all of my siblings are married. They have kids. They like have a house, those things. And I'm like, I live in an apartment downtown with my son in Kansas City, like 4 hours away from all of my family. So they're like, and it's actually kind of comical because 2 of my siblings like claim black sheep. And I'm like, you don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know, yeah.
But it's okay. Like, it's totally okay. And I'm very accepting of the role, like quietly, because I know my family loves me, but I am different than the rest of my family. We're just different, and that's okay. But in saying that, like, I definitely think that everybody who was involved in my life, like, previously would have just assumed I would have done exactly what my family did. I mean, own a business that my family does too. All of, like, similar things to what we're doing, but more liberal, if that makes any sense. So they're much more conservative and all of those things, and I'm just more like, let's figure it out as we go.
Did you get a lot of pushback for dating someone who was African American? Were you married or no?
No, I've never been married. Nope.
So did you get any pushback from people? I mean, and both sides, because I dated a Chiefs football player back in the day, and he was a fine man. But even on his side, they were like, okay, white girl, you're going to be here for a little bit. And he, and I was like, okay. And then on my end, my family was intimidated. They saw him roll up in his big Hummer, and my dad's like, what are you doing with my daughter? So, like it's a weird place to be in. So did you have any pushback? Did you have any like bad experiences from people?
Definitely a lot of experiences. I mean, I've actually, since I've been like 18, I've only ever dated one white guy, and that was like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So I've pretty much, like, since I went to college, like, I've really only dated somebody outside of my race. But I definitively remember talking to my parents, because at the time we hadn't had the conversations. I knew that they had love in their heart for people, but we hadn't talked about racism at all. Yeah. So I didn't even really know where they stood, simply because the conversation wasn't had. And it wasn't like, quote unquote, necessary, because at the time everything was so quiet and social media didn't really exist, and Branson's mostly white, so it didn't even really come up in our lives. But then obviously I go to college, and me just being like, I like other people's experiences. Like, I like to learn from those, So again, dating outside of my race, I specifically remember coming home and being like, Mom and Dad, like, I'm dating a black guy. I sat them down, and it was a real conversation, just because I didn't know even where anybody stood. And they were like, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, so like, we're good? And they're like, we're good. And we're good. It's good. And that was like, 11 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever. Gosh, am I really 30? I'm really 30.
I know. Isn't it crazy when you start to think about it?
Yeah. But my parents' only concern was about having biracial kids, and they were like, just know that whoever you love is whoever you love, but your kids, like, that's going to be a conversation with them. Like, their lives are going to be different, so you have to be prepared for helping with that. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to cry. But that, I specifically remember that being my mom's only point, was just know that it's going to be different for your kids, and I was like, that's powerful, but I'm grateful that that's your only concern is for my future kids. Like, you have to help them through things, because it is different,
I'm going to ask you a really personal question. You can tell me to fuck off right here. Was when you found out you were pregnant with Jaden, talk to me about, I mean, if you're comfortable talking about like what that feeling was.
Yeah.
And if you felt alone, if you felt supported. I myself have been in a situation to where I was pregnant. It was a bad point in time in my life. And I didn't have the child.
Yeah.
And I live with that guilt every day of my life. And I don't have kids now. And it's really tough when I revisit it. I think that there's not enough conversations about, first of all, just thinking about being a mom and whether you're married or not, whether father's going to be there or not. That's one separate issue.
Right.
But then if you're going into it with, oh, I know when I have this child, it's not going to look like me. Talk to me about the emotions that went through your head and when he finally was in your arms.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so much. From start to now. I can't say finished because obviously it's never finished. I'm still a mom. Yeah. But I never once questioned whether or not I was going to have him. I mean, I found out when I was 28. I was stable in every way except for, myself and the dad, we were living together at the time, but we were definitely in the process of moving on already when we found out. So definitively, I was 9 weeks and like 2 days pregnant. Very first sonogram, whatever, and we officially parted ways. It was terrifying, but also relieving in the sense of like I could have my own space mentally, and I could, there was actually some video that somebody had sent me randomly. Like I don't even speak to this person, but they were like, I saw this and I thought of you. So it was actually really strange. But it was a video about basically the water that you provide your child. It's like the environment that you provide your child. And you want it to be as pure as possible. So you want to keep as little influence, obviously, on your environment as you can, because you want it to be pure for them, right? Yeah. So they were talking about muddying the water with different things, and our water was like pitch black pollution. You know what I mean? Yeah. Together, like what we could have provided him together was not healthy. Yeah. So separate, at minimum, I knew that in my own environment that I could provide him, at least I could provide pure water on that side. Yeah. But together it didn't make any sense. Yeah. So that was just kind of where I lived, in that space of like, this is what's healthy for both of us. This is where I can give him a good space for both of us to kind of grow up together in, Yeah. So yeah, that's just kind of where I lived. And Aja went through the whole thing with me. I mean, she's literally, every step of the way, like I really was terrified to tell her, I'm not gonna lie.
I'm sure my face didn't help because when you told me, I honestly
But she knew all of the backstory too, right? Yeah. So she was heavily involved and she knew everything else that was going on. So she knew we were already on our way out and all of those things. So when I told her, she was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Like I thought you guys were like breaking up and now you're pregnant. What?
Oh, wow.
And I also too, like I've said this before, I think probably until then I was stuck in this, not really like a mindset, but I just never really felt older. And so when she told me, I feel like I had flashbacks to like being like 16 and someone's telling you they're pregnant and you're like, oh my God, what have you told your parents? And I'm like, hold on, we're grown up now.
She's 28.
Okay. She can have a baby now. It's good. It's all good.
That's so crazy because that was my age.
And really?
And it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And it was the same scary scenario of like the person was just not right. And then, but I properly freaked out. So when you decided, yes, was there ever a doubt that you were going to all right.
No.
So never doubt. And then like through the pregnancy, did you get any people like, are you okay?
Oh my gosh, every day.
Yeah.
Like 17 times a day. And I was like, can I just like wear those noise canceling headphones everywhere
Totally.
I go?
That was like one of the things that like you could tell it would wear on her, and because her and his father are so social, and we're in Kansas City, so it's big, but it's really small.
We live a mile apart.
Everyone knows everyone, and like she couldn't go. She still doesn't go anywhere without seeing somebody that she knows. So imagine like going through all of that, and it would be I could tell crazy. It was a lot.
So when you was it a tough pregnancy at all?
Oh no, it was amazing.
And then when you had him, was it just like?
Yeah, it was perfect. Like it couldn't have been better. I don't really feel like. Like, I really don't think it could have been better. I mean, obviously there's all of the background stuff, but the actual pregnancy itself was just like phenomenal. It was like my most cherished time of my whole life. Obviously having Jane now is, you know, next level. But in terms of pregnancy, if I knew all pregnancies could go that way, I would just like live pregnant.
I love it. Well, I guess flipping over to you now, you're watching this as her friend. Was there ever a conversation with her about your child is not going to look like you? Like, did you ever have that thought as a friend? Because I think that's where I go kind of blind. Is I think that's the hard part now. Is like now I really when Johnny and I were looking at adopting, and we realized like we were more than happy to consider a child that didn't look like us. Then we realized, oh no, we actually have to think about this. And we need to have our friends around us to have conversations with, because,
and just support you.
Yeah, and just not we don't have it figured all out. So did you guys ever have a conversation about that or no?
I know we did. I don't remember when it was, if it was when you were pregnant or if it was after. I mean, we've always joked, like, I'm pretty sure when you were pregnant, we started joking about it, but like, oh, it's gonna look like my baby and not her baby.
And people actually say that all the time. Anytime we're in public together, they're always like, wait, why is she holding your baby? She's like, it's not my baby, it's her baby.
God. And speaking about the LGBTQ community, I'm like, that's the other thing.
I know.
I can totally, like, because again, you guys are I love it.
They totally thought we were lesbians.
I love it. And I love it. But it's also this really great, I don't know, it's just this great way to understand that you were there with her through all of that. And I didn't know that. Now for you, dating and like, and where, because, you know, you're somebody who I've always thought is just, I don't know, you like the moment I met you, you have this confidence it's more of a quiet confidence. Like Mallory and I are just like la, 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 la. And you come in and you're like, you hold your space, and when you talk you're thoughtful about it. And I would think that not only, you know, here you are, but then if people go to date you and then they're like, oh my God, your dad is who? You're this woman. I mean, I could see where it's like, then there's this whole other thing of like living up to this, again, the stereotype in the books that I've been reading, with African American women, of we like make them these regal women who, you know, like in movies, they're always these magical friends that come in and help us. And it's like, okay, all right, great. But like, I'm actually a freaking mess, you know? I'm like, you know, so talk to me about dating and just, again, stereotypes like 10 years ago with yourself, and then where you fit and where you don't fit into it.
Well, starting like 10 years ago, I mean, so I am mixed. My mom's white, my dad's black. I grew up living downtown, but my dad was a lawyer. We didn't struggle. You know, I went to a private school, and I went to a private school with mostly white kids. So there were a lot of interesting things that I had to navigate that I wasn't really anticipating navigating. I never fully fit in with the kids that I went to school with. There were only 3 black kids total in my grade. And then I never really fit in with, you know, groups of black kids either. So it's like, well, I mean, I guess I'll try my best to fit in with the kids I see every day and go to school with. So that's kind of what I did. But I think growing up out of that, it made me, I don't want to use the word fearful, because I don't want it to come across like I was scared of black people. I was fearful because I knew that I never fit in. So in my head, I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to hang out with these people, but like, they're going to be talking about me behind my back the whole time. They're going to say that I talk like a white girl. They're going to say that I'm not really black like they are. So like, why am I even here? They're going to talk about my hair, like all the things that I wasn't doing right. So I feel like I almost stereotyped myself a lot too. Like I was never quite good enough. And then that probably carried on. But I think that back then, a stereotype that people would think of me was like, oh, you know, her dad is big and important and they make money. And like, I think I started dating, I was in a relationship for 7 years. I think I started dating him when I was 15 or 16, maybe 16. And I remember his brothers would always ask me, they'd be like, what kind of car does your dad drive? Does he have a really nice car? How big is your house? Do you like, we should go to your house and see what your house looks like. And I'm like, it's not really like, it's not like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just,
I mean, you make this stereotype of someone who's in politics has got to be, you know, I mean, my dad, Brad. It's like a Brad, you know. Now, did you date white and black guys, or have you? I mean, because I'm curious.
Well, I shouldn't say growing up.
growing up
when I was dating. No, I mean, high school through college, it was mainly white guys. After my long relationship ended, I dated a couple of black guys. It wasn't really a thought. It wasn't like, I'm going to go date a black guy.
It's so funny because it was never a thought for me either. But then it became a thought when I was hoping to be serious with this former football player. And then I realized like what I was getting on both sides. And then it was just like, okay.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I was, you know, oh my God. I mean, I'm 43. I got married 3 years ago. I went through a lot, but it's funny how now, and my husband is, he's somebody who you don't right off the bat go, oh yeah, he's Hispanic, but he is. And his last name is, and it's crazy because we were just talking the other day and someone had, that he works with had text messaged him and it was not meant for him. And it was after meeting him, my husband, for, you know, just a quick like lunch meeting or whatever. And he referred to him as that Mexican guy. And my dad, not my dad, my dad's actually Persian, but my husband is actually half Panamanian, half Irish. But it's so funny how like with me, people would always put me in the box of like, you know, oh, that Arab girl. And I'm like, well, I know I just did a report on Iran. It's not Saudi Arabian, but you know, it's okay. But it's interesting how, you know, even now, like my brain doesn't go there, but it has to shift now because I realize that colorblind isn't the best way to be either.
Yeah.
It's good to go into a relationship and go, I am dating someone who is this color.
Right.
Because I do think that, you know, it now needs to be a conversation.
Right.
So we really understand each other and each other's experiences, or try and listen, even if it's out of our realm of understanding.
Yeah. Colorblindness is kind of like that ignorance is bliss thing where it's like, you're just like, oh, I don't see it, so it doesn't exist. It's like, no, it exists. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing. And it's okay that it's okay to have those conversations, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to cry about it. It's okay to yell about it. You know what I mean? Like, because there's just so much history. There's so much emotion. There's so much violence that goes into it. So to not be emotional about it is like a little strange. You know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. So blindness is not healthy for the situation.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a strange climate now too, because we are almost a week and a half, 2 weeks away from like when we had heavy protests going on in Kansas City, and you know, Juneteenth is now, and you know, it's funny. It's a weird feeling where that uncomfortable feeling, it's in me still, and it's going to be in there. It's going to be there for a while. And I just don't understand the people who've like kind of flipped the script and now it's like, it's back to normal. And I'm like, how can we can never go back to normal after not only just what we witnessed and the repetitiveness of it, even after George Floyd. I mean, the news just popped up and you're like, God, more and more things just continually happen. So I guess, you know, the thing is that I could talk to you two forever. I mean, when I'm in these kind of discussions, these are the discussions that turn me on, because I feel like we're all on even playing ground of like, we're kind of like figuring out
totally,
you know, where we're at. When I was with Dr. Auburn, oh my Lord, I was literally like shaking in my boots because she's my friend, and her whole life's work is about this. But it feels really good to be able to have these conversations and kind of work out like what are our next steps. So I guess as we kind of close up this podcast, I'd like you both to kind of think about the people who are listening, because they're going to be your clients, your friends, and hopefully a bigger audience with the platform I'm on. I'm hoping that we can give them just a little bit of our own insight. So speaking as a biracial woman, as a mother of a biracial child, white women navigating this, if you have any pieces of advice, and then just any insight that you would want to give. And I'll start with you.
I feel like one of the most important things is to understand that every single person is figuring out their starting point right now. It's like, what do you know about it? Like, have you experienced anything with it? You know, everybody is figuring out their own personal starting point. And even if your starting point, like my starting point is further back than Aja's, you know, she grew up biracial. I will never be at her, you know what I mean? Yeah. So our starting points are different, and that's okay. It's okay for me to be behind her. But what's not okay is to not take steps forward and put in work to do better and progress and learn about it and have the conversation. So I think that sometimes people get caught up in their starting point, and it's almost something that they're like, even in like fitness, you know, anything, they're terrified because they know they want to lose 100 pounds, or, you know, you've never read a single book about like racism in your life. So you're kind of terrified to take that first step. It's intimidating, but it's so crucial that you do. Like, just take the step and then take the next one when your body will allow it. You know what I mean? Like, just continue taking the steps forward, and your starting point is okay. It's just not okay to stay there.
Yeah.
You know?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And I mean, what I was going to say kind of goes with that is everyone does have that starting point. And even if your starting point is just realizing, like, why was I so quick to that judgment? Why was I so quick to say
self-awareness?
Yeah, like why am I feeling that way? Why am I feeling like I don't want to say Black Lives Matter? Why is that offending me? Do I feel like people are telling me that I'm not important? Do I not understand what's going on? I mean, even like just the idea of, and the phrase defund the police, the amount of Facebook posts you see, or you know, people talking about it that are saying, well, okay, well, what are you guys going to do when the police are gone? Well, you didn't even Google what defunding the police
exactly
means. You just said, well, that sounds dumb. Yeah. I don't know every detail, but I definitely know we're not saying like, well, everybody just,
it's
every
a free
man
anarchy, the purge, right?
Yeah,
no,
like, it means
far
something, and it means a lot more than you're looking at. And that tends to be true with almost everything that people are thinking. You look further than the first words that you see. If you see something, read it all before you react to it. Maybe take a step back and think before you react to it. Let it soak in. If you aren't Black, maybe think about how that would feel, or you know, just do your research and see what's actually going on before you make these sometimes very crazy statements. And also speak up, because if you're educating yourself, I think a lot of people, and I actually saw a video of this happening, someone posted online. It was a girl reacting to her dad, a white girl and her father. She was reacting to her dad saying some racist things. And I'm like, what if everybody did that? You know what I mean? Like, what if, like, it starts, I'm not saying everybody's parents are racist, but it tends to, stuff gets taught down the line, right? So if there is somebody eventually on that line that says, no, I'm not believing that, and if you guys do, like, that's it, it really makes people think. It makes people think like, wow, my own flesh and blood is telling me that I'm wrong and I'm crazy for feeling this way. Maybe I need to take a look at what I'm doing, because so many people just say whatever they want. I mean, if I looked crazy every day and I was like, I look so pretty, and Mallory's like, yeah, you do. Well, then I think it. But if she's like, you actually kind of look a little wild right now. I look in the mirror at myself, right? So everyone needs to look in the mirror at themselves and then help other people also. But that doesn't mean attacking people on Facebook. But sometimes you have to speak up and have those conversations. And
now's not a time not to have an opinion.
Right.
And again, the other thing is I said to Dr. Auburn, I think I've used the reference of like pony legs or like fawn legs of like, I'm my anti-racism legs, I thought they were really strong. And I realized that my gait's a little wobbly, you know, and I'm navigating it. I know that it's on me to do the work, but I also think that these conversations are so important now, especially if you're business owners, if you're preaching health and wellness, it's now a responsibility in our lives to implement this standard of this is what I'm holding you to, whether you work for me, whether you're my client, I'm holding you to a standard to be better.
Right.
And you don't have to know it all. You don't have to be the next big activist, but I hope that you at least have an opinion and start to use your voice.
Right.
So I don't know. I've really enjoyed talking with you ladies. I want to talk to you guys forever because there's so many things. But how can everyone find you on social media and with Flexy? I mean, who wouldn't want to work with these women? Even if it's like half the workout, I'd be like, I wouldn't want to work out. I just want to hang out and talk.
Sometimes that can be a problem.
Yeah.
Our Instagram is at its.flexy. Our website is itsflexy.com. If you Google Flexy Kansas City, you can pretty much find us on all of the platforms that we have. Kind of where it's at.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for listening at the Seraphine podcast. And if you are fiending for more, me and my producer, Aaron Graham, love to shoot the shit and talk, but also dig a little deeper over each episode of the podcast. So stay tuned for more if you'd like. See you on the flip side. Bye-bye.